All right, we're gonna get started. Welcome everyone. I'm very excited to have John Edelson here today. I'll get to John toward the end of the first couple of slides, but this is a great topic. I talked to him in the beginning. I should have a little bit better idea. He doesn't want to admit the exact amount he sold for, but he said he can say tens of millions of dollars. I think that would have drawn a lot more people to be excited about, like, wow, you know, build a software, market a software, sell a software, and get to play table tennis or ping pong the entire time. So welcome to SFIMA. I know almost everybody here, so glad you guys came. Please keep coming. I would say that we have a bit of a call for topics. So if there's something you're very interested in learning about, let us know. You can email president@SFIMA. Peter and I get it. You can email board@SFIMA, and a group of us get it. But tell us about topics you really want to hear about. I mean, there's so much changing with AI, with graphics, with social, with search. You tell us what you want. We'll get the best speakers here that we can get and give you some really good educational content.
Another angle would be like somebody who's writing a book. You know, sometimes they write a book and they want to go on a little road tour and find groups like this that we can put them in front of. Like and also like some people who are running events. Like who was here that was running
Michael King.
Michael King came. He was running a big SEO event, a search event in New York City. He was looking for opportunities to speak at, you know, venues like this so that he can get, you know, more wind behind his sails for that. So if you hear of anything like that within the spheres that you guys work for, and they're a good speaker, they're talking about AI or marketing in general, please let us know. I happen to be working on to get something that Joe made fun of me about today because he was kind of linking it to like, maybe we should get MySpace back in here, but I'm trying to get USPS in here. Has anybody here signed up for like daily deliveries, emails from USPS? But you know, like get something from like a Chewy, and then it has a link there that you can. There's something there with digital. So hopefully we'll get somebody from USPS in here. Anyway, I'm sorry.
I think I said Blockbuster. I said, should we just go to Blockbuster and learn about renting movies?
Yeah, that's what it is.
There's one Blockbuster left in the country.
Yeah, and it's an Airbnb now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
So sponsorships are available. Sign up as memberships. We're going to do a little bit better about following up with members that have expired and need to renew. And that's really it. I mean, we can move on to John. So again, John has a very interesting career. Have the pleasure of knowing him for probably 20 years.
20 years.
Maybe actually a little bit longer. And he's done so many different things, but Time for Learning was really an incredible success story. There's a lot of challenges with building the software, with growing the software, selling the software, and then selling it again. So it's a great story. Let's welcome him up, and then, you know, definitely I'd say have some good questions lined up for the end. I already have one that he's going to talk about, so let's welcome up John.
Thank you. Make it full screen. Okay, 2001. Not a good time for John Edelson. For those of you who remember, for those of you who read the history books, there was a big high-tech crash. At the time, I was a senior vice president in a public company that got absolutely wiped out by the crash. I lost my job. I lost most of my money. It was a terrible time for John Edelson. The story I'm going to tell is sort of how I went from there to running quite a successful company and then ultimately exiting from it. Click. Here's the topics. We're going to start with the context of where I was at the start. How did I pick a business? For me, that's the key success factor. You really got to pick a business right, and so on and so forth. Click. Oh, this is going to hurt my neck.
The other TV is on the fritz, I'm sorry.
Turn around.
Oh, yeah.
In my 20s, I'd been in business consulting. I was in the big strategy firms. I spent 2 years in DC in consulting, 2 years in Paris, a consulting firm. I also got an MBA in that period, spent 2 years as a business consultant in West African Peace Corps. At age 30, I decided I didn't like consulting. I wanted to do, and it was one of those moments when you stare into your navel and try to figure out who I am or who I want to be. And it turns out I wanted to go to San Francisco, this was 1988, and get involved in high technology. So I went out to San Francisco, lucked into a job at Silicon Graphics, which was the heart of the 3D revolution. This is when computer graphics were getting really cool. From there, I went over to work at a company called 3DO. Anybody know it? 3DO was the world's best video game system for almost 3 years. We were after the Nintendo Sega era, and we were just doing fantastic, leading the world, and then the PlayStation came out, and we were toast. At that point, I had started running the developer program, and I was running the European rollout, so there I was in England, wife, child, no job. I got picked up immediately to run a English video game and technology company, Argonaut. Anybody played Croc, Legend of the Gobos? I went platinum as a game producer. It's just been reissued on the PlayStation 5. My kids and I are playing it. It's a happy 3D platformer, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. And then Argonaut also had some chips. I helped spin out a company from there. I moved to Florida for some family reasons. So I was a remote worker from 98 on, and I was involved in ARC semiconductor IP. Then the crash happened. Not only did the crash happen, I had some personal problems. There was a divorce, and all divorces are bad. This was a fully bad one. My father died abruptly, quite young. My cousin died, my uncle died. It was a bad time for John Edelson. In any case, I decided to take some time off, and try and figure out what I was going to do. Now, like all of you, I had some business ideas. Some of you have thought of starting a business. All of you will think about starting a business. It's a lot of fun. I decided that I was going to do it, and I was going to go about it in a very methodical manner. So when I had an idea for a business, I wouldn't just think about it. I would go to my computer and I would write it down. I had a spreadsheet, all these descriptions. I'd put together a 4 or 5 sentence description of it, and then I'd let it sit for a week or 2 weeks. It's just amazing how many of these ideas that I was really excited about, I thought they were fantastic. By forcing myself to think about them, not think about them for 2 weeks and come back and look at them. Somehow they had just gone to shit. Why was I excited about this? It's just amazing how you get caught up in the moment. So a bunch of them didn't get any more attention. They go right into the, you like my trash can? I do that myself. Some of them, however, 2 weeks later looked pretty good. So they would get the full business plan treatment. I would sit there and write out 2 or 3 pages about why it was a good idea, how it would work. There wasn't any particular format, but I would write these and I would refine it and I would start researching. I had about a dozen ideas that I worked on. I've lost the list and the paperwork around it. One of them was for teen games online. You've seen tons and tons of these portals in the last 15 years, so it was a good idea, but not one I pursued. Another one was an audio product line that I was just in love with. The idea was that little kids would have this big red button on the computer and they could record and then play it back, and then there'd be 10 sound effects, and then we could make it into a mixer and it would get more and more feature rich. At that point, the voice over IP group calls on computers were just emerging. It was kind of a fun thing. So I could have OEM that technology. I was going to merge it with all these sound effects so the kids could sit there and make funny noises to each other. I was sure it was a great product line. And then the end of it was going to be all these things where you learn music and rhythm and tone, which have all shown up in the video games. It's a great product line. And my brother, through the years, as all these things have come out, has pointed out, hey, you dreamed that up. Yeah, but I didn't do it. There's a professional accreditation. This is for all the universities and colleges who are supposed to, accredit you for all these things. Someone could OEM that. There was the idea of doing a Kumon online, doing a kids educational thing where it would be supplementary education for the kids online. And then there was a video game publisher for health things. There's an awful lot of games and different treatments for kids on the spectrum, for kids with dyslexia, for attention deficit. There's stuff for elder people to help us stay sharp. There's a whole bunch of these things. I thought there was room for a publisher to focus on this. So I had all these ideas I was excited about. How did I make a decision? Well, one thing is I did not want to raise money. I had already been involved in companies with venture capital, boards of directors, and that is a hell that I just didn't wish to go back through. So I was going to spend my own money and not and not look for money, not do it. So that was one of the big constraints. I didn't want to travel anymore. In the semiconductor job, I had a monthly schedule that involved a trip to London, a trip to San Francisco, and down to Santa Cruz, and a trip to Boston, and up into Canada. That was 3 trips a month before I did business travel. I was sort of a super salesman, and salesmen would call me up and, can you get down here and save this customer? I'd fly in, they'd pick me up at the airport, and I'd go in, what are we supposed to say, what are we supposed to do, and go in and do all these PowerPoints and try and create deals, save deals. I was done. I just didn't want any more clients. I just wanted customers. No more of this promising the world to people and trying to save it all. I wanted a growth area, and I wanted something I was going to be passionate about, something I got excited about working on day in, day out, something I could think about. One thing about the semiconductor IP industry is it's really, really, really boring. Nobody understands it. It's incredibly complicated. The hardware engineer crowd is about as, any hardware engineers here? It's about as dull a crowd as you'll ever get. I wanted something that, with real people, maybe an industry with women in it, for instance. That'd be nice. So, question mark? Click. So which was the winner? So I was going to do online education for pre-K through 3rd for supplementary. So when the kids needed some extra help, some remediation, a chance to study in the summer, this was what I was going to do. What was I excited about? Well, I just was really interested in how kids learn to read and how they learn the basics of math and why so many kids fail at it and why is it so difficult? We've been doing this for so long. Why does most of the country fail to learn to read effectively? It's just bizarre. So I was very excited about it. And very early on, I'd come up with a business model. It turns out there's really good software for teaching this. It gets sold into schools on a per student basis. Often $5 a student a month. They weren't very interested in the consumer market. So I thought, having spoken to some of these, that I could license it from them for $5 a student a month, and then license it to customers, to end users, at $20 a month. And make $1 million. But that was the heart of the idea. The economics were really simple. This was not going to be rocket science. We're in South Florida. We have good engineers, but we don't have brilliant high-tech engineers, the sort of things I would have needed for the audio. This was the sort of stuff that could successfully be done here in a normal office. So that's what I went off to do. One of the problems is I had never done any online marketing. I didn't really know anything about it. In fact, I hadn't really done any B2C marketing at all. But I stumbled across a thing called SFIMA, and I showed up at the meetings. I would sit right there in the front row. There was no sitting in the back for me. I was very earnest and intense. I would have a notebook. There'd be a speaker who's going to talk about search engine optimization, or SEO. And I'd like, what does SEO stand for? Search engine optimization. I'm trying to spell optimization. But I was just the geekiest. I was 45 years old. I'm going to learn this stuff, and I'm going to learn it really, really well. Pay-per-click. Oh, pay-per-click. Okay. Affiliate. Oh, what's an affiliate program? And these were all sessions. I'd ask questions. I'd buttonhole the speaker afterwards. I actually remember, I think, sessions on each one of those topics. And it is true that you can learn all this stuff online, but you got to be a hero to do that. It's just so tough to study and not have anyone to talk to about it, not have anyone to make it real. So I thought that was magic, that I could sort of study this stuff online, or things I hadn't even heard of. The subject line for newsletters. The what? Very important. The snippet. Oh, the snippet. Huh. And somebody would talk about that, and then I could go home and research it. For me, it was just fabulous and gave me a forum. It's where I met an awful lot of the people who came to work for us, either as employees or as contractors. I was a long, long time client of Joe's, very successfully, many different versions. At one point, we worked together in all sorts of different ways. It was fantastic and a lot of fun. For those of you who remember, we used to be at the Riverside Hotel. You were there. Anyone else who went back to the Riverside Hotel meetings? There we go. The Fishing Hall of Fame. Gulfstream Park, there were some meetings there.
Yeah, and we had the big events there.
And the cruise.
Oh, there was a cruise. Yep.
Remember the cruises every year?
Yeah.
There was Gallipes.
Philippines.
And there was some other place I just can't remember. There was another.
The auto museum.
No, somewhere up.
The W.
Antique car museum.
The Antique Car Museum. Absolutely.
That's what I
Went to
did.
those.
Oh God, how did I forget the Antique Car Museum? We threw a company party there one year. 20s themed. Everybody had to show up as flappers and all that. Any case, deeply grateful. And in fact, I am living proof that it could give you a head up. And that's why I sort of show up to do this. That I'm giving back, huge believer in it. And let's keep going. So here's the schedule. In November 2023, I had sat around on my duff, going to the gym, writing business plans, taking care of my mom, trying to get through the divorce. She's not the world's worst ex. There's a lot of competition for that, but it was tough. But it was time to get on with it. And so I picked a plan, and then I wrote myself a schedule. I worked a week and 2 week blocks, and I worked solid on the schedule for probably 2 days, and everything I had to do to get to market was put on this schedule in 1 or 2 week blocks. So I needed an engineer to help me put this thing together. A week to write an ad and get it placed, 1 week to wait, 1 week to review resumes, 1 week to do interviews, 1 week the way I hired. By the way, the guy I picked is right here, Alon. I had someone, I don't remember who, be a friend, one of my friends who was an engineering guy, to do interviews and review the resumes with me because I'm not competent at that. But ultimately, I ended up with a short list of 3 people. I gave them all a project to do for some number of $100. And one of them crapped out and didn't do anything. One of them produced just an awful piece of work. And Alon produced a nice piece of work. So that's how he got hired. But I put the whole schedule together. One of the things we were talking about is how you work when you're completely by yourself and it's all just head work. I was very methodical and intentional about this too. So at the end of every day, the most important thing I would do that day is to make my list of to-dos for the following day. I would generally aim at 5 or 4 tasks. And I would give them each a place. First thing in the morning, I'll get up, I'll go to my desk, I'll do this. It'll take about 90 minutes. Then I'll go for a run, take a shower, go to Panera Bread, and I'll do this. And I'll talk to those other people that are Panera Bread, so I'm not just sitting there going crazy. When that's done, I'll go over to Starbucks, because I like their coffee better, whether or not their food. I'll do this. Then I'll go back to my house, do this piece of work, and so on and so forth. But it was all planned out. I didn't have impossible lists. I like to get through the day and feel like I'd accomplished what I had to. And when I finished it, I'm like, okay, I'm done. Oops, got to make tomorrow's list. And that's how I got organized. Look here. Pick a software vendor. So this was one of the hardest tasks of all. I generated a list of 100 different software vendors that were selling into schools that had credible software. I looked at them, I looked at their websites, I called them up. There was a lot of mailing of CDs back then. I ended up with a list of 10 that were sort of credible and sort of interested. I ended up with a list of 3 or 4 that I could work with. One of them had an office right here in Weston. I drove out there, they were really nice, the software was good. I said, good enough. So I signed a deal with them and went to work. They closed the office about a year later. But in any case, that's how we got going. I signed up with a company called Compass Learning. I built a brand. Let's take a look at the brand. Let's go to the next page. We're going to back up then. Oh, back up. Back up. So I hired an animator, an artist, and we designed a character. And I described to him what I wanted to do. Look, there's going to be a computer mouse, And then there's gonna be like a school bell. Remember that horrible school bell sound? And then the mouse is gonna, arms and legs will pop out. In fact, why don't we click on that for a second?
I don't think I ever realized that was a mouse.
Oh, you can't hear it. Bring, bring, wait, wait. Wait. Hi, kids. I'm Ed, the educational mouse. It's time for learning and fun. And the guy who did the initial voice was actually the Care Bears voice, which we decided not to use.
Yeah.
Sorry? Steve, his son might have done the original voice. We changed his voice a whole bunch of times. Let's go back up a slide. We'll stay there for a second.
Okay,
That's good.
That's fine.
So other tasks, one of the things is I really think you got to test things. So by the way, when I hired an engineer, I can't wait to say this. You paying attention, Lon? He said he could get the whole thing done in 2 months. I penciled in 6. I think we got it done in 5.
The requirements could
We set up an alpha test, so we actually, I used my kids and the neighbor kids, hey, log in and do these lessons and we'd see what worked and what didn't work and what they could do. Eventually, we got to a beta test where a bunch of kids that I didn't know were given logins and they went in. So we got the whole thing pretty much working. And then in August of 2004, we started placing pay-per-click ads. And by we, I mean I. I went in and put my credit card in, started driving traffic, and I had my computer in my living room set so that if anybody actually signed up, it would go ding. Now, you would like to think that all the software was written. In fact, when it was launched, when someone signed up, the reason it dinged is because I had an email sent to a certain address, and that would ding. I then had to sit down at the computer and copy paste all the information that they had put into the software in about 3 or 4 different places so that they could actually log in. So in terms of minimum requirements, as we talk about to launch, none of that part of the database was up and running. There's all sorts of things that got added in afterwards. Ready, fire, aim. But people started signing up. I do remember that the first person to sign up was a pair of brothers in Hollywood, Florida. They lasted about 3 weeks before they quit and asked for their money back. I wanted to drive down there and talk to them. I was furious. Let's keep going. Keep going. So how did it go? Well, a few months in, I started doing numbers, and it turns out it was costing me about $150 to get a customer in the door, $155. And given the quit rate, I was making about $50 on each customer. So I had some work to do, lots of work. What we really did is we focused on pay-per-click as a way of finding out what terms were valuable and which ones were useless. So I thought we'd be making money off learning games, educational games. Turns out the conversion rate on those terms was 0, despite the massive amount of traffic. Whereas other terms like printable worksheets, which was just not a fit with what we were, was the money, was where the money came from. There were lots and lots of surprises. And with pay-per-click, I could test things. It was very close to it back then, and you didn't have all these tools between you and that. So learned an awful lot about which words, which terms turned out to be the right sort of terms. And from there, we would use that to direct the search engine optimization program. A year later, we were actually making money on customers, which was nice because I was getting pretty close to broke. We would make $75 on a customer. We'd get them in the door at $50. Now here I'm going to get up on my high horse. I used to go on and on about this. I'll cut me off when I go too long. The backbone of any successful consumer marketing operation is rigorous analytics and intellectual honesty. Damn it. any buffoon can get a lot of customers. You just place a lot of ads. They'll show up, they'll sign up, people are confused, the numbers won't work. The hard thing, what a consumer business is about, is making the numbers work. And understanding the numbers is way more complicated than you would think. Why is that? You know, you spend $1,000, you get 10 customers, $100 a customer. Right? What's complicated? Well, in our case, we had a 2-week money-back guarantee. So we got this whole long sales funnel, all these things happen, multi-point touch. They get to the end, they sign up, and then they quit. 12 days later, I take their money back. I bang my head against the wall, I chew the rug, I pound the floor, I scream and yell. I finally call the lady up and say, you know, man, I'm just curious, you know, what the hell? You know, what the hell? You're killing me. What are you doing? She says, no, I love you guys. Well, you just quit. Yeah, I'm shopping for the fall. This is May. We're finishing our school year. Next year we need a new curriculum. We're going to use you. Oh. Okay, now they sign up again in August. Still going through a bunch of ads and all. And they sign up with one kid. And then a month later, they add a second kid. Okay, now start figuring out customer acquisition costs with that. Plus, here's another weird thing. A lot of people use us in the fall, cancel at Christmas time. We wouldn't hear from them for a year. And then the next September, they sign up again. What the hell are you doing? Well, you know, the kids get bored of it. So we use you in the fall and we do this other thing in the spring when we travel. Oh, okay. Now try and figure out customer acquisition costs with all these complicated usage patterns. It's really, really complicated. Most people, when they do customer acquisition costs, seem to be trying to impress investors, or they're trying to impress their friends, or they're wishful thinking. This is why so many companies, and I've seen it over and over again, they show that their email marketing is cost effective. They show that their pay-per-click is cost effective. They show that the search engine optimization, everything is cost effective at making money, and then the company goes out of business. What happened? Well, they kidded themselves on customer acquisition costs because everybody figured it out differently, and the lifetime value of the customers was a bunch of nonsense. How could you possibly really know what the value of a customer is who shows up today? It's a projection on the future. You have no idea really what's going to happen in the future. New competition shows up. So your best understanding of lifetime value of the customer is based on looking at historical patterns and trying to forecast that into the future. There's an enormous room for wishful thinking and sheer bullshit in that process. One of the advantages, in fact, the big advantage of just being me, spending my own money trying to start a company, is I could be rigorously analytical and tough about this and try and make sure that we were doing things that were economically profitable. Hold on, let's see if I missed anything there. Oops. I pivoted pretty heavily the first year. My idea was to focus on all these rich suburban people with kids that they would spend any amount of money on to help them get started, particularly when they're young. And these customers were okay, but they weren't fabulous. Meanwhile, these homeschoolers would call me up and say, hey, can we use you for homeschooling? Well, I don't know. I think you're pretty weird, and I'm not sure I want to get involved with you homeschoolers. Talk to the hand. And being a marketing genius, I said that for a while because, why get involved with strange people with strange ideas? And, would that really work out? But, why not? So I started looking at it, and it turns out we had a pretty good solution for homeschoolers, and they really liked it. They hadn't seen anything like this software before. So we pivoted to, we're a homeschooling company with after school and enrichment, and that was the focus from then on in. Social media. So we killed it with social media in the early years. We just killed it. Yahoo groups, we were all over them. Forums, we had a forum with thousands of discussions every day, really deep discussions. Some of them I will remember my entire life. I remember one mom getting on there saying, my daughter asked me today, does she really have to understand semicolons and colons? And I said, no. There's no reason you have to know how to use them. But now I'm wondering about it. What do you think? Big, long discussion, and people spilling their guts. One mom says, to be honest, after the first date with this man, he wrote me the nicest thank you letter with correct use of semicolons and colons, and I decided to marry him. And he doesn't know this. There were just, and it, by the way, all these discussions about semicolons and colons were circular because people were showing off how effectively they know how to use them. It was just fantastic. But people would ask all the questions. It was long form forums were really fun. So on and so forth. Who knows what that little thing there is at the bottom?
What?
At the very bottom, there's a graphic of something. Who knows what it is? I'm sorry? There you go. Why don't you pass it up to me?
I have a few of those, Tom.
So these nail files, and I didn't steal them, I did leave the company, but these were all obsoleted because we don't do time for writing anymore. We would take to trade shows, and it would be a huge thing. Turns out people would show up a year later and want to, do you still have any nail files? But we had all these rules. You don't get a nail file until you answer these questions for us and tell us what you like and you don't like. Oh, by the way, would you help talk to these people who are thinking of using time for learning? Just all those details of how you get your money's worth at a show. And by the way, these are easy to transport. They're really kind of fun. There you go.
Yeah.
You needed one, Joe.
I had a nail crack this morning.
Some principles that I ran the company by. You take care of your staff. It's the most important thing. Without your staff, you're nowhere. So every week I'd have an executive staff meeting. Lon probably remembers it well. I'd start with some news. Here's what's going on. Here's the things on my mind. Here's things you have to worry about. What's going on with people? And, Lon, you got that engineer who's a problem. How's that going? You got this support person. You got this problem. People first. Take care of the staff. There's really 2 or 3 categories of staff. There's the ones that are just fantastic and you hold on to them, the golden geese. There's all the people who are usual followers, and every once in a while you find one who's evil and a bad egg, and you try and get them out of there as fast as you can. I will say that I never felt like I got any better at recognizing who would be what when I hired them. Mistakes just happen. It's just so hard to tell, but you work with someone for a month or two, and some of them are just, scary. Get them out of there. Don't deal with it too long. Focus on current customers. They were our business. Usually this came down to what features do they need, what interface is bothering them, what's not working. Try and make them happy, give things to them. When you screw up, or when you don't screw up and they call up and you have a discussion with them, take a minute, take one of the coffee mugs, put it in a box, put the little noodles around it, write a personal note, put it in a box, seal the box, mail it off to them. A homeschool mom who gets a time for learning mug to drink her coffee out of, who signed with a little note signed by John, president of Time for Learning, she's a friend for life. You want to know how to drive down customer acquisition costs? Give out coffee mugs to moms. It's just magic. I would often say that we get most of our new business from our existing business, either add a child's, refer friends, or people who used to be members who think fondly of us, moved on for some reason, because eventually they get sick of you, and then they came back. I also had a whole culture of words to win by, a list of 10 points that I would push. This is how we work. Important as we keep going. Click. There we are at a trade show. There we are with our support staff, working the mouse. When the company was all grown up, this is what we looked like. Right now I'm just talking about Time for Learning, but there are actually 2 sides to the business. In addition to the Time for Learning and Time for Writing and homeschool.com's homeschool side, we had software that went into schools, Spelling City, Writing City, and Science for Us. Spelling City in particular was a massive hit across the country. We automated spelling and vocabulary tests, we gamified it, we automated the whole thing. It was just wonderful. By the way, it was initially user.
When I was young, I used spelling too.
What was your favorite game?
It was years ago, I don't remember.
Hang mouse.
But we remember, me and other people, we loved it. So
There was a time I could, if I met a third grade teacher, I could ask her with some confidence that she would answer, hey, what do you like about Spelling City? What's your favorite game? And she would tell me. It was big. It was initially created, by the way, as a strategy to build search engine credibility and send it to Time for Learning. That because teachers and schools and districts would link to it, and then it would link to Time for Learning, I could push Time for Learning up in the search engines back in the old days when life was so simple. So we often had about 100 people, depending on how you count. That doesn't count the 25 writing teachers who were at their houses, or the dozen or so contractors who were homeschool moms that were helping us. When we started doing the exiting stuff, we did slides that looked like this. Yes, you'll notice I took the numbers off. That remained somewhat confidential, but we had a consistent growth path for quite a while. It was a lot of fun. As the founder and president of this, I often found myself wondering, do I lead or do I manage? How much do I just let different people in the company run their part of the company? How much do I get in there and stay hands-on and inspire, guide, lead, and somewhat annoy my middle management staff? Always a good question. I gotta admit, there's an enormous amount of luck in the success that was there. I started at the exact time when search engine and pay-per-click was getting exciting. I was there before Webmaster Tools. When Webmaster Tools first came out, I was there. It was sort of a fun time to be doing this because you didn't need vast expertise. In fact, there were no fancy tools. You really just needed to be adept at spreadsheets and be willing to grunt through it. And I was all about grunting through big spreadsheets. Marketing, I loved writing marketing text. I remember the opening email to people who signed up for more information. As a parent, I'll always remember the first words my children spoke, the first time I saw them take steps standing up, and the first time I saw them read a sentence by themselves. However, unlike the first two processes, learning to read is not a natural process, and it is troubleful. Most kids at some point need some intervention as they build the skills to learn to read. Many parents, in their eagerness to help, push the child on the wrong skills at the wrong time. Stay with me over the next few newsletters, and I'll equip you to support your child and not screw them the fuck up. There was some fun in there. But this was, from the heart, me to you. It was so much fun writing this stuff. And I never found anyone who could write these sorts of things, any of my staff who could. However, there were homeschool moms who could write even better than me, and they were just amazing. So we enlisted an awful lot of them to tell their story and do this stuff. Let's keep going. So in any case, at age 58, I decided it's time for me to get my head out of my computer and look at the big picture. One of the secrets to success in all those early years is I spent no time speaking to investors. I spent no time speaking to investors. How much? None. Did they call up? All the time. What did I say? I said, oh, I'm so glad to make contact with you. Let me get your name, your number, your email, your company. So I'm not talking to investors right now, but when I do, can I give you a call? I know you want to talk to us right now. I really don't have time. I'm going to a meeting. No, I won't set up a call. Thank you so much for your interest. Click. These people will eat you to death. They have so much time. They're so interested. They just want to spend time on the phone. Unless you're looking for money, it's totally counterproductive. Don't let them just take your time. Now, if you're trying to learn something from them, that's different. But part of it is I was focused. I spent no time on fancy presentations, no time going to conferences, pitching, just didn't do it. And then in this year, I decided, okay, it's time to do it. I signed up to go to this big ed tech conference, and it was a big deal. The very first lunch, I sat down, I was at a table with 12 people. When we sat down, we decided to introduce ourselves. Hi, I'm John Edelson. I've got this little company. How many employees do you have? I have 60 employees. We do this, we do that. How about you? I'm a startup. Here's what I'm going to do. Do you have any employees? Have you gotten started? No, I don't have any revenue yet. I'm just getting started. Okay. How about you? I'm a startup. I'm going to do this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, what about you? I'm a venture capitalist focused on the educational technology business, K-12. Interesting. How about you? I'm a private equity firm focused on educational technology and invested in this. What about you? I'm an investment banker. I'm a middleman in this business, and so on around the table. There was one person over there. He was a part of a real company, hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. But in this table, more than half the people were money people. The next big category were little startups who didn't have anything going, and there were a few real companies. This was not the only table in the room. There were 50 to 100 tables. There was just a sea of these people. I just thought it was amazing. I thought it was terrifying. But it seemed like an opportunity. It seemed like this was a hot market, and now was the time. In fact, I've seen bubbles go up and I've seen bubbles go down. Remember when we started? I'd been in a company that at one point was worth over $1 billion, over £1 billion. In fact, we got to 1.5 billion. But then the high tech crash happened and we were worth 20% of that. I know about these things. I looked around this room and said, this is a pretty healthy market. I think it's time to take some chips off the table, which means I'm going to sell part of the company. By the way, if I say something that you don't know the expression, you go ahead and say, what does that mean? There was a lot of interest in me at this conference. So again, I had the problem of everybody sort of attaching to me. A lot of the people were pretty damn sleazy. Hey, I got an idea, cigar. Well, you actually have a cigar, but it's what I was imagining. I got this shell company, it's sort of public, this and that, we'll do this, we'll do that, you'll get millions of dollars, Yeah, okay, I gotta get out of here. Disgusting. I mean, there was just so many get-rich-quick things. It was not my style. In any case, I started the exit process. I was anxious about it. Why? One, I've been heads down, just doing software. I answered the phone for 3 years. Hello, time for learning. John here. How can I help you? I felt a little out of my depth at first because I just hadn't been doing this. And also I have a history of screwing up my deals. And I'd been through some pretty cool companies, all sorts of money had gotten made, not by me. So I went into this with a little anxiety. Once I got going, the anxiety disappeared. Turns out I can do this, I've done it before. And it started being sort of fun. My plan was, plan A. Next quarter I'm gonna hire a CFO. I've been operating without a real accountant in the company. We just sort of did QuickBooks, had a CPA who did our taxes, but we didn't really have a CPA. Quarter after that, we will restate our accounting as GAAP compliant. Anybody want to know what that means? Or?
I was going to ask you.
So GAAP is the standard for doing proper accounting. What this means is, say, Spelling City, people would pay us for 1 year. They give us the money, and we say, "Hey, we just got some money, and we book it, and we just made $100. You're not supposed to do that. If you pay them $100 for 12 months, what you're supposed to do is take the $100, put it into prepaid revenue, and then every month you take 1/12 of the $100 and move it to revenue, so that it gets properly done through the year. If you invest $1 million in making software, you capitalize it. So you've invested $1 million, and over 3 years, you recognize it as an expense. So there's all these geeky rules so that when you look at a set of accounts, they're all done the exact same way.
And no boat gas? Boat gas doesn't count, it's a different expense. Like
I,
the personal expenses, you gotta pull all that out, right?
As long as it's following the general accepted accounting principles.
yeah, the personal expenses are real. I mean, if you have your own company, there is a, you know, rather than take money, pay taxes on it, and then spend it, wouldn't it be better to spend it before you pay taxes? So for instance, if I bought a computer or a TV for my house, which I might sometimes use for business, is that a business expense? Yeah, that's a business expense. My kids who have helped me so much in starting this company, they looked at all the software. Are they contractors? Because they have a very low tax rate? Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of expenses that end up in small businesses which have to be taken out before you show it to anybody. But in any case, GAAP accounting, if everybody did their accounting, you would never trust anyone's books. If they do it right, it's all done a certain way, and then it's audited, which was, so it was one project per quarter, hire a CFO, switch to GAAP accounting, hire an audit firm, do the audit, hire an investment bank to write a book about how cool we are and what a great investment we are, and have them run a little auction for us. So it was a 6-quarter process, a year and a half. That was plan A, which I really did not want to do. Plan B, which is what I hope would work, is anybody who asked what I was going to do, I'd tell them plan A, and then see if they tried to talk me into taking a shortcut. And sure enough, it just went like that. There was one company called VSS, private equity. In May, I went to the EdTech conference. I had a little trouble hiring a CFO. I got one hired in Q3 of that year. In Q4, we had some differences. He quit the first week of the next year, so I hired another accountant, another CFO. She was wonderful and is still there. Along the way, I've been talking to 2 or 3 private equity firms, but really just one, VSS. And in Q1, he said, well, you know, what if we did a deal? I said, well, you know, I'm really not ready, but you know, you certainly can make an offer. And he flew down, we had lunch, and he asked for some numbers, and I gave him a page of numbers. And we talked about whether I was willing to give up control or whether I wanted to maintain 60%. And I said I could give up control. What else do you think? Well, I want a certain amount of money. How much? I'll send it to you in an email. I was squeamish about it. I didn't want to write it down. I sent him an email, and he says, okay, let's do it. So that's how the deal got formulated. That was in Q1 of the year. In Q4 of that year, we got the thing closed. Actually, Q2. In the middle of that, there's a big process called due diligence and contracts, which just is a ton of work, all sorts of lawyers, not much fun. In 2017, backed by them, I did 3 little acquisitions, grew the company a little bit. And then in the beginning of 2018, he flew down, which surprised me, and said, I want to talk to you about something. He says, you might not know this, but we own 70% of this company called Cambium Learning. They're traded on the public stock exchange with the other 30%, symbol ABCD, and we're going to try and sell them. We're going to put them up for auction. We're going to run a process with an investment bank. And you could be merged in with them and run the process. We could run the process with you. And you'll make a little bit more money because you're part of this big thing. I'm like, you know, what are you doing? I thought I was doing fine. You could run a little company. You lose faith in me? He says, well, you don't have to do it. Do you want to see the numbers? Okay, I'll look at the numbers. Oh, wow. Yeah, I'd do that in a second. Which started the worst year of my business life because it was a really complicated transaction. It was just horribly complicated. And it kept changing, and things kept changing, and there were leaks, so their stock went and started going up, and it just goes on and on and on. It was awful. There was a fun part when we actually did the roadshow, me and the rest of their company. We went off and pitched all these private equity firms, strategic partners. But the deal eventually got done. They sold the whole thing to somebody called Veritas Private Equity, huge private equity company. They took the company private. I became a division president in KBM Learning, and I worked there as a division president for 4 years through COVID. And at the end of 2022, I thought, okay, my work here is done, and resigned. So there were 2 exits. The first one when I sold a little over half to VSS, and then the second one when I sold the rest of it to Veritas. There were some other little exits. Actually, it gets really complicated. There's all sorts of weird things that happen when you do that. The real magic here in terms of, we're talking about money, in terms of sheer greed, is that I skipped the venture capital phase. Venture capital is when they give you money because you're trying to create a firm, you're trying to grow a firm, but you're not making any money. You're not that profitable. The next stage of investment is when it's private equity, when you're a profitable company. And they can buy you mostly by borrowing money against your own cash flow. And you get a much better valuation. Also, you get the money. When venture capital invests in a company, the money goes in the company to be spent growing the company. And of course, they always want to put more money in because they get more of the company. So the founders get squished out. They start with 100% of the company. Once they got a bunch of friends and family invested, they're down to 80% of the company. The venture capitalist comes in and takes 40% of the company. They now have 30. They end up with a small part of the company in venture capital. With private, and the money isn't going to them. When you get to private equity, the money comes right to me. They don't put any money in the company because the company's making money. So that's the big difference. And there it is. There's a story. I'll take questions, and then we'll answer all of them.
So first of all, thank you. It's great story. So how did you feel about when you were like selling and the various points and giving up control, and then they were telling you that you're gonna be like, you had an emotional attachment, I imagine, to this business that you created. So how did you feel?
So I was a little naive, despite everything. Well, the first time when I gave up control to VSS, I felt fine. Because, in fact, they were completely dependent on me. I still had control. They could control the budget, they could control this, they could control that, but I was still in control, and I really liked the guy. He and I got along very well. The big tension was he wanted me to buy big things all the time. He kept sending me ideas, let's buy this thing. And I'd look at it, I'm like, what a nightmare. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, look at this, look at that, look at that. This is a nightmare of a company. He says, oh, okay. How about this one? How about this one? How about that one? They wanted me to be a roll-up. And in the year or so I was with them, I just didn't see anything big that I wanted to buy. So they were a little disappointed I just bought little ones. When I sold to the big company, in some ways it was fun. All of a sudden I had a peer group. There were other division presidents. And that was fine because it's a little lonely running your own company. And now there were 4 or 5 of us who all had the same problems because our president was this way and our CFO was that way and the private equity firm was. I didn't much like the second private equity firm. I love the first one. Actually, the guys I knew there have gone elsewhere, and I'm an investor in their firm, so I stay in touch with them. I was not a control freak. I didn't mind giving up. Maybe the most fun I ever had was running the company, but I was getting old, and I was anxious about money. But getting out of there cleanly was important. There were some, like most companies, there were some hairs on the deal, as they say. There were some problems. I was overly dependent on one source of software. So Time for Learning looks like a really good business, it's exciting, but if you strip away all the stories, we're basically a distributor of somebody else's software. And what if they decided that they wanted to do it themselves and cut us out? Or started pressuring us that they want to buy us for cheap. I was always worried about that they could make the business go away.
Do Do you mean that you used someone else's learning management system, like it was
Not just the learning management system, all the lessons.
Oh, so it was someone else's curriculum also.
Yeah, so a year of really good interactive software. So we did Science for Us for K, first and second. You could figure you're spending almost $1 million per grade per year. $3 million to develop 3 years of software. We had from pre-K up to 12th grade, all 4 major areas, math, language arts, science and social studies, a dozen electives, art. There's no way we could develop much of this ourselves. The only things we did develop was K through 5 science, preschool, and K through 5, actually never did K, 2nd through 5th social studies. So we used, other than that, we were using their stuff. And so we were really a distributor. If they really wanted to put the screws to us, they're also owned by a private equity firm, so they're pretty ruthless. They could have done it. Now it was sort of a balance of power because I was also their largest customer. And so that was a delicate dance, but that was a source of anxiety year in, year out, every time I tried to get to renew the software. So I was pretty pleased to get out of there on a successful note. There, you get a nail file because you asked a question.
I can, sure. Oh, I get an F.
Not that your nails aren't perfect.
I think I have one at home from years ago. Can I take another one?
You don't get another nail file.
She's gonna give it to me.
What is the state of the company today?
I don't really know that I steered clear of it since I left. Nobody really wants the old president hanging around saying, I wouldn't do that if I were you. This is the way to do it. But there have been layoffs. Steve got laid off 2 weeks ago. Steve Motigi. Jen got laid off or fired a year ago. So it's been tough. All of ed tech has had a really tough time. That during the COVID era, all this money went to the schools, and everybody bought software for 5 years and 3 years at one time. And then when COVID ended, the budgets disappeared, plus everybody had bought all the software they need for a few years. So the entire ed tech industry fell off a cliff. And in terms of closing the loop on the bubble story, I sold on the upside when the bubble was still getting bigger. But it certainly crashed down. Ed tech companies are not worth what they were. So I got out early. I could have waited a few more years, but I could also have missed it. So.
And talk about homeschooling and COVID.
Yeah, so I was against COVID. I thought it was a terrible, terrible thing. And here's why from my point of view. I had a nice algorithmic business that we really understood. We knew how much it cost to acquire customers. We knew email open rates. We had stuff down to 2 decimal points. We understood the monthly cycle of people canceling, joining. It was so much fun because I could call my revenue with some accuracy for 6 months upcoming just on the curves. And then COVID hits, and all of a sudden all the parents are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. What if I homeschool? What if I did this? What if I did that? And they're all frantic and going around in all directions. So all of my careful analysis of data is useless because it's an entirely different situation. So I hated COVID. It did greatly expand the market for a while. And then they all went back to school and they were glad to be rid of it. Homeschooling overall has been a growth industry. If you hadn't had that crazy bubble, it would be a much healthier market. School violence is terrifying. Kids don't like active shooter drills. School violence within the schools, just bullying is rampant. Quality of a lot of schools is poor. Homeschooling tools and programs and communities have gotten rich, pretty good. There's a lot, and now there's a lot of money going to homeschoolers for the curriculum. So overall, it's a growth industry.
I just want to say that it was an amazing journey to see. Some of the stuff is also new to me. But I do remember a couple of experiences. One that was really unique which not even with you, I don't think you know about this. No, good thing. So, being a small company, many of us were involved with the customers, right? Somebody had a problem, accident logging in or doing something. It wasn't like we went to John, hey, there's a problem with the customer. We try to solve it ourselves. And in many cases, I would help a teacher or a homeschooler or whatever the case may be. One time I got a letter from an entire class, and there was a note in there from every kid thanking me for helping them to solve their problem, whatever it was, right? And that was like the most rewarding, amazing thing, because it just was so, it made a connection, you know, that we were helping people, not just there, do analytics all day long, right? So it was just quite an experience. Really, I mean, for me, I enjoyed every bit of it, and I appreciate it.
So I was determined to do new software that hadn't been done that really worked well. And you're probably talking about vocabulary spelling.
I think it was probably
because it was
something
a
along those
classroom.
lines. Yeah, something.
What we did just delighted teachers and students and
incredible,
parents.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know. I do know why nobody else had done it. It was hard and expensive and risky, but it really lit the students up, empowered them to study on their own, allowed them to get the practice they needed to really understand words. Our science program won all the awards nationally for best science program. It was so much fun. I've run over badly.
Okay. I think everybody's
Yes.
interested. Who did you have, or if you did this over, that you would hire to be able to navigate all the nuances of everything that could happen? Like, I know a CFO, like a CPA, but without working with a venture capital company or private equity, because you're looking to hire you because they often can't even be trusted. Like, how would you do this? Because like even an MBA program isn't going to explain like all of that.
There's no substitute for broad understanding and detailed knowledge. I've been working for 20 years, 25 years, and I've run companies already. So that helped, that I was, I run a company in England, 100 people, 150 people, fired people, hired people, negotiated. When I see people starting companies with no business experience, I'm like, gosh, how is that possibly going to work? Part of it is I had a real vision of the software I wanted to create. I'd already created software in the video game business. This is where I got a lot of my chutzpah from. I had created a game which kept kids awake at night, night after night after night, through the weekend, because it was so much fun. Now, I didn't create it myself, I was part of a team, but we sat there and thought about what makes this level fun. This level is too similar to the previous level, it's gotta be this way, it's gotta be that way. No, that's too hard. We had really wrestled with user interface and challenge. And why the hell is a game fun? It's kind of stupid, But I always thought of games as educational. That you give the kid a character, put them in a room. There's a door at the end of the room. Kid knows they're supposed to take the character and steer it through the door. And they've got a little controller. Once they get through there, you pop them into a new level, and now there's a pair of these guys coming at them. Now they have to run around those guys and get to the door. And you keep building skills as you go through the levels. My thinking in all the software that we got to do was, it's got to start out simple, it's got to be visual, you got to know what you're supposed to do just by looking at it. There can't be instructions. But the kids are pretty familiar with software. Use the right paradigms, and the kids will get it. Teachers maybe not, parents maybe not, but the kids will know. And then you take them to the next thing, and it's got to be a little bit harder or a little bit different, and it's got to be paced. I mean, educational software tends not to have any rhythm, any soul, unlike video games, which have spectacular music and rhythm and everything. So a lot of what we did was just design based on overlapping principles of design for games because it's fun, design for ease of use because you want people to know how to do it, and design for educational impact so that they end up transformed by what they're going through. And that was kind of one of the disciplines, to how to marry all those different ways of thinking.
Did you really want to create something from scratch, or did you ever consider like acquiring a company and building it?
I looked at acquiring some companies. Having done a turnaround before, I kind of didn't want to clean up somebody else's mess. And anything you could buy, nobody was selling a healthy company. They were only selling messed up companies. And it seemed easier to start with a clean situation.
I see. And one more question. What do you see the industry going in the future? Because there's so many learning management systems and there's so many different competitors that have curriculums and stuff. How do you see this playing out in EdTech?
So I'm a revolutionary. I believe in history, which means I think things change. The fact that they are the way they are today doesn't mean they'll be that way in the future. All of this by way of saying that I think it's time for a general rethink of education because we've all lost confidence in the current system. If I were to ask, how many of you think the K-12 system that we have in the US is excellent, I wouldn't see any hands. How many of you think it's satisfactory? I might see some hands. How many of you think it needs improvement? All the hands would go up. Where do we go with that? Well, it's hard because everybody has a different idea about what improve it, but nobody's happy with the way it is. Events are going to overtake us because the charter schools and the private schools and the vouchers and all these things are basically ripping all the money out of the public school systems. The public school systems are fixed cost base, so they're going to implode pretty soon, a lot of them. I mean, you just can't take half the students out and have them keep operating. They got to start shutting schools. I think the bigger question is, what are kids supposed to be learning? In the world of AI, what do you have to learn? What's worth learning? How do you develop the mind when knowledge is that accessible? And that's not a question that anybody's got any really good answers for yet. At least answers that have resonated through it. So I think in the next decade, we're going to see a dramatically different educational system. When I was working for Time for Learning, one of our spiels was, look, just as in COVID, we learned that work is something you do, not a place that you go. Education is something that you do. It's not a place that you go. You can be homeschooled, or you can do remote school. You can do it at home. I think that's true. But the big question over what's going to happen with education, I can't answer that. No one can. But I think it'll change dramatically in the next decade.
You were to have a spreadsheet again of ideas. Anything bubbles to the top of interest? Or you're not running that spreadsheet?
I'd like to make cookies. I like cookies. I think about community a lot. I think it'd be really fun to do community-based things. I'm an old fart who's retired. I feel a little isolated. There's a famous book called Bowling Alone. Anybody read it? Okay, so the U.S. is the last question. We can chat afterwards. The U.S. was always famous for being the biggest country of joiners in the world. When Europeans would come over here in the 30s, in the 50s, and the 60s, everyone was in a bowling league, everyone belonged to a bridge club, everyone was in a flower club. We had this huge joiners, and Europeans would talk endlessly about it. And then it ended. Something happened in the 70s that all this pattern of everybody being parts of all these organizations just disappeared. Rotary Club and Lions Club and all this stuff just went into free fall. And someone wrote a landmark book about it, about bowling alone. Instead of being part of a bowling team and everybody going on Tuesday night, people just go off and bowl by themselves. I think a lot about this, that I think there's room to create lots of infrastructure around communities. I personally am playing a lot of ping pong these days. But I would do something like that in that world. That's pretty vague. Thank you very much.